Last night, you probably went to bed, closed your eyes, and tried to get one unbroken block of 8 hours. You woke up around 3 a.m. You panicked a little. You checked the clock. You told yourself something was wrong with you. Nothing was wrong with you. You were doing something your ancestors did every single night for most of human history. The 8 hour block feels like biology. It is not. It is a habit, and a fairly recent one. Here is the strange part. For most of the time humans have existed, nobody slept in one long stretch, they slept in two. The historian Roger Ekirch spent over a decade digging through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and he found the same phrase appearing again and again: first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed a few hours after dusk, sleep for 3 or 4 hours, wake up naturally in the dead of night, stay awake for an hour or two, and then fall back asleep until dawn. That waking period had a name. It was called the watch. People used it to pray, to talk quietly with a partner, to tend a fire. Some even visited neighbors. It was not insomnia. It was simply the middle of the night, doing what the middle of the night was for. Court testimonies from the era even describe events during the watch, which tells you something important. It wasn't rare or hidden. It was ordinary enough to appear in legal records, medical advice, and old letters about what to do between the sleeps. So what changed? Light changed. Cheap, controllable, artificial light. Once gas lamps and then electric bulbs let people push bedtime later and later, the natural two-part rhythm got compressed into a single forced block. Ekirch's research suggests segmented sleep was not the exception in human history. It was the rule. The unbroken 8 hour night is the exception, and it is only a couple hundred years old. Think about how fast that shift happened. Electric light entered ordinary homes within a single human lifetime. Grandparents who grew up with candles watched their grandchildren grow up under bulbs, 1 or 2 generations. That is nothing on the timescale your body was shaped by. Evolution does not rewrite itself in 2 generations. Culture can change overnight. Biology cannot. Your body, though, never got the memo. The sleep researcher Nathaniel Kleitman ran an experiment in 1938 that still shapes how scientists think about this. He and a colleague lived for over a month in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, cut off from sunlight, trying to see if the human body would naturally settle into a different rhythm without daylight cues. His body did not fully adapt to a new schedule, but the experiment planted a question that researchers are still chasing today. How much of our sleep pattern is truly wired in, and how much is just what the modern world trained us to expect? The cave sat at a constant temperature, with no sunrise, no sunset, nothing but the 2 men's bodies to keep time. He wanted to know if a day could be stretched and the body would simply follow. It mostly refused. Something inside kept pulling back toward its own rhythm. Fast forward to the 1990s. The psychiatrist Thomas Wehr ran a study where he put people in near total darkness for 14 hours a day, no clocks, no artificial light, for weeks at a time. Within about a month, his subjects stopped sleeping in one continuous block. On their own, without anyone telling them to, they drifted back into 2 segments: a period of sleep, a quiet waking period in the middle of the night, then a second period of sleep. Sound familiar? Wehr's subjects were not broken, they were reverting. Stripped of artificial light, the modern human body seems to default back to the same rhythm Ekirch found in centuries-old diaries. That 3 a.m. waking you dread might not be a malfunction. It might be your biology trying to run its original program on hardware surrounded by the wrong environment. Here's what makes this stranger still. The people in Wehr's study did not feel anxious during that middle waking hour. They described it as calm, almost meditative. The panic most people feel today at 3 a.m. might not come from the waking itself. It might come from what you were taught to believe that waking means. This is where the tired part comes in. If your body still carries some pull toward that older 2-phase rhythm, but your schedule, your job, and your own expectations demand one flat, unbroken block, you end up fighting yourself every single night. You wake at 3 a.m. You assume that's a problem. you get anxious about it. The anxiety itself keeps you awake longer than the natural waking period ever would have. Then you sleep in, feel groggy, blame the bad night, and start the next day already behind. That anxiety response has a name too. Sleep researchers call it conditioned arousal, and it is almost entirely learned. Wake up once in a panic, and your brain quietly files that 3 a.m. window away as a threat. The next night, some part of you is already braced for it before your head even hits the pillow. You are not just failing to sleep through the night, you are training yourself to fear a perfectly normal biological event. The sleep scientist Matthew Walker has spent years studying what chronic sleep disruption does to the brain and body, from memory consolidation to immune function to mood regulation. His work makes one thing very clear. It is not just quantity of sleep that matters. It is the fight against your own rhythm that does the damage. Constantly forcing your body into a shape it does not naturally take is its own kind of exhaustion, separate from simply not getting enough hours. Walker's research also points to something easy to miss. Deep sleep tends to cluster earlier in the night, while lighter, more easily interrupted sleep dominates the later hours. That means a natural waking period toward early morning is not a sign your sleep failed. It may simply be your brain finishing the deep restorative work first and shifting into a lighter phase exactly when your ancestors' watch would have begun. There's a second piece to this, and it has nothing to do with history. It has to do with your own internal clock. The chronobiologist Till Roenneberg has spent decades studying something called chronotype, essentially your personal genetically influenced preference for when you sleep and wake. Some people are wired to peak early, some are wired to peak late. Roenneberg's research found that most modern schedules are built around one chronotype and force everyone else to live against their own biology. He even coined a term for the exhaustion that results: social jet lag. The gap between when your body wants to sleep and when your life makes you sleep. Roenneberg's surveys found something almost nobody expects. Most of us are quietly jet lagged every week without ever crossing a time zone. Your alarm clock does to your rhythm roughly what a flight does. Multiply that by every workday, and it looks less like an inconvenience and more like a debt your body never gets to repay. Put those two ideas together: a rhythm shaped by millennia of segmented sleep, a personal clock shaped by your own genetics. And on top of both of those, a single rigid number, 8 hours, unbroken. Same time every night, treated as the only acceptable version of rest. No wonder so many people wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. So what do you actually do with this? Not panic at 3 a.m. That's the first shift. If you wake in the middle of the night and your mind is calm, you are not failing at sleep. You may simply be experiencing the watch, the same quiet waking hour your ancestors used for centuries. Lying there accepting it, rather than fighting it, is often enough to let sleep return naturally. Try, if you can, to let that window exist instead of erasing it. Keep the room dark. Skip the phone. Let your thoughts move slowly instead of reaching for a screen to fill the gap. Within a few nights, many people find that stretch of wakefulness gets shorter on its own, simply because it stops carrying a threat. Pay attention to your own rhythm instead of a universal number. Some nights your body may want closer to 7 hours in one block. Other nights it may want a split. The number was never the point. The feeling of being rested was always the actual goal, and that feeling comes from working with your rhythm, not forcing a schedule onto it, and maybe most importantly, stop treating a broken night as a broken you. Every time you wake up in the dark and think something is wrong, you are arguing with a pattern that kept humans rested for thousands of years before anyone owned a light bulb. Your ancestors were not lying awake with dread at 3 a.m. They were tending a fire, talking quietly, waiting for sleep to come back around the same way it always had. Somewhere between candlelight and blue light, an entire generation quietly forgot that the night used to have two halves. What got labeled a disorder was, for most of human history, simply Tuesday. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll probably reach for a switch instead of a candle. You'll probably aim for one long, unbroken block, and you'll probably lie there frustrated if you don't get it. But the next time you wake in the dark for no obvious reason, try something different. Let it be the watch, not the wound. Your body has been doing this far longer than you've been worrying about it.